Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ideas Hive. My name is Kristen Anderson, and I am the branch manager of Ideas for Us. And we're so excited for an awesome panel tonight as we talk about water conservation and the water crisis. But before we get started, we want to express how deeply disheartened we are by everything that's going on in DC. We want to publicly condemn white supremacy and domestic terrorism. And it's so heartbreaking and also terrifying to see everything going on like this. But it's so important to understand that we need to continue to learn about the problems in our world so that we're better able to approach them and come up with solutions. And so that's what we're doing here tonight as we talk about the water crisis here in Florida. And so before I introduce our amazing panelists, I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are as an organization and what we do in our community. So if you're not familiar with Ideas for Us, we are a global environmental nonprofit, an NGO accredited with the United Nations, and we work to develop, fund, and scale solutions that solve the world's most pressing environmental and social challenges. And we do this in our branches around the world by following this three-step model where we educate, engage, and mobilize volunteers. So the first step, of course, is to educate, and that's where we bring in experts to talk at our Hive meetings that happen every month, where they discuss a topic that aligns with one of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And after they equip us with the knowledge that we need to approach this problem, we host discussions at the Hive on how can we solve this global problem with a local solution. And then we take the ideas that were thrown around and we work with a team of volunteers to plan and organize these ideas and turn them into action projects so that we can mobilize volunteers for boots on the ground action to combat climate issues every single month. And this can take so many different forms as every single month we focus on a different pillar of sustainability. So we have energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. So our action projects can range from solar panel workforce, where we train people on how to install solar panels, to waste audits, to tree plantings, and anything that you can imagine. And we do this because we believe that this information should be free and readily available to people. And that we don't just want to stop at talking about it and educating people. We also want to give people opportunities and multiple opportunities every single month in order to do something about climate change. And so if you like what you see, please consider donating to support this mission. We have so many different projects going on domestically and internationally, so you can browse through our website and find one that interests you and donate to that. One that I want to highlight right now is our Uganda branch is planting a bamboo forest alongside a river that has recently flooded that has displaced hundreds of people in a nearby village and also completely desolated the farmlands alongside. And so planting the bamboo will help heal the soil and cleanse the water, and they'll also provide relief to the climate refugees. So you can find that on our Facebook, along with a short documentary film that they made where they interview the climate refugees and show the problem at hand. So please check that out and consider donating. We also want to continue this conversation all month long through our podcast, so please tune in at anchor.fm and hear from sustainability experts from around the world. So tonight, once again, we're talking about the water crisis, and we have this amazing group of panelists, Jennifer Mitchell, Steve Schwab, and Brittany Sellers from all the different sectors of water conservation. And so thank you guys so much for being here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Jennifer Mitchell first. She's the Public Communications Coordinator of the St. Johns River Management District. And I'll go ahead and give it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I do appreciate getting to be here and getting to speak about all of the ways that individuals are able to both conserve water, but also raising awareness of how we use water. So if you don't mind, go into our next slide. So for those of you who aren't familiar with what the water management districts are here in Florida, there are 5 water management districts, and I rep and work for the St. Johns River Water Management District, and they are different districts that are broken up based on the hydrologic boundaries of our surface waters, in which there are 4 core missions that all of our work falls under. And ultimately, it is to make sure that there is enough water for us, the people of Florida, the people that might be moving to Florida, the growing population here, as well as our natural systems. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. And so in order to accomplish that core mission of ensuring water availability and that it is being utilized appropriately, we have four things that everything we do falls under one of these four core missions, and those are water supply, water quality, flood protection, and natural systems. And we have had some great webinars over the past several months if you want to learn more about how we're addressing each one of those core missions that are on our website. But today, when we're talking about water conservation, that's going to fall under that water supply side. So next slide, please. So when we think about how much water gets used or how water is needing to be available, it is important to understand how much water is used. So this is numbers for our district of fresh water use. It is important, and I'll point out that the public supply and private well, those represent over 60% of the water that's used. That's the water that's used within our homes, businesses. So it shows us that there is a large opportunity for us as individuals to make a big impact in the way that we change our water use. And it can be even small things that really add up to large water savings throughout an entire year. We do put out this water use report on an annual basis, and so that usually comes out in about March or April. And so if you'll go to the next slide, I'll zoom in and talk about those changes over time. So I did mention that we want to ensure that we have enough water for us and our natural systems, and of course that growing population that we have here in Florida. The black line on this slide represents that population change, so that increased population we have here. And so we can see that although population has been increasing over the past 10 years or so, that the amount of water that gets used on a per capita basis in that public supply and domestic self-supply has not been growing at the same rate as early on in this graph. So we are seeing a lot of conservation. Part of that is also the increased usage of reclaimed water, which I'll mention in a minute. But anytime we're able to see this freshwater use decreasing on that per capita basis is a great thing and shows that water conservation is possible, and we can see some big changes. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we are working to ensure that water is available for us, our natural systems, is through our regional water supply plans. And in our district, there are 3 different regions that these are focused on. This one will focus on that Central Florida Water Initiative, and that's a collaboration between our water management district, Southwest Florida Water Management District, and South Florida Water Management District, where the water management districts, along with the utilities and other users other water users, other stakeholders are going to have had input on those regional water supply plans. And those take into account that available supply. So the water from our aquifer, water from surface water, other places that water could come from. It looks at what are those projected demands, what is the population projected to change over those 20 years, and where can alternative water supply come from, and what about conservation? So if you don't mind going to the next slide. So again, if we look at the Central Florida Water Initiative, this plan was recently approved by all 3 of the boards of the water management districts, and is moving forward, I believe. And so if you're interested in getting further information about that, there is a nice lengthy document that you can read more about the different areas of use, how the information that is incorporated in this is determined, and that's all on the CFWI website. Next slide, please. So when we focus in and look at the Central Florida Water Initiative area, and again, looking at that projected growth, it is important to notice that the people living in this area and our homes, our businesses, those type of things, we are expected to see about a 49% increase. And that's using population projections from the University of Florida of their population growth expectations. And so we model how water is going to be utilized over that time period. So you can see the current usage and how it fluctuates. And some of that fluctuation is based on weather. So in wetter years, more water or less water will be utilized, where in drier years, we're going to see agriculture and landscaping and public supply using less or using more water. Next slide, please. So when we look at that overall amount of water that's going to be needed, that projected demand, we see that within our public supply, in each of these areas that are broken down, there are large projections of conservation that are available. So for public supply, everything from more efficient interiors to those passive ways that conservation can occur, to the more active conservation plans, where we're really looking at landscape irrigation and focusing on how we can change our irrigation, those type of things, allow for or account for the greatest potential for conservation. So that's about 40 so million gallons a day that is potentially available for conservation. And this is just, again, in the CFWI area. If you don't mind going to the next slide, Kristen. So at the district, since outdoor irrigation is one of the largest places where water gets utilized, we have had a campaign the past year called Waterless, which is really trying to help residents that have irrigation systems think about how they can decrease water use. One of the best ways is to just turn off your irrigation and wait until your grass shows you that it needs water if you are irrigating your lawn. But if you're not up for that, just making sure that your timer is set for the irrigation restrictions. And so right now, no more than 1 day per week. And if you're interested in those designated days, we have all that information on our website. And you don't want to water in the middle of the day, because that's when we lose the greatest amount of water to evaporation. Next slide, please. And so I just wanted to real quick talk about how does the water move here in Florida? Because I feel like a lot of times people don't think about that and forget about it. And so we are able to see our surface water, so our rivers and our lakes. We may dig down into those surface sands. Next slide, please. But as we go down into our geology of our state, so all of our water is connected, in both the superficial aquifer. It is impacting our wetlands, but it's, again, just all connected. So the last piece, if you don't mind, Kristen, the next slide, is us. So the way that we develop, the way that we're changing how water gets utilized, we are creating increased amounts of runoff and increasing, I guess, this whole system. So it's just good to know where our water comes from and how we're influencing those changes. So we'll talk about conservation in just a little bit, but just wanted to remind everybody about where our water comes from.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It's so important to understand that conservation does work, and the education that you're doing really does make people understand that every person does have an impact. And even little things like don't water your lawn in the middle of the day. I never knew that. I don't have a lawn, but I'll go tell my parents. So thank you so much. So now we're going to go ahead and give it over to Steve Schwab, the Operations Chief at Water Conserv 2. So thank you, Steve, for being here.
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. You can go to the first slide. kind of go over the use of reclaimed in Florida. And I'm going to come at it from our perspective at Conserv in a sense, but also from the state. You can go ahead. Next slide. I kind of got to brag about the project a bit. I've been there for over 30 years and almost when it started. And the city and the county have two reclaimed water facilities that supply water out to us. They're reclaimed water, and we distribute it. Project was started. You can read the list, and we started receiving water back in '86. I started in '90, and have seen a lot of changes over the years and things that are kind of concerning on how they affect the future of the water supply. You can go to the next slide. We use a lot of what's called rapid infiltration basins or RIBs. We've had agricultural irrigation, there's some industrial, there's a lot of golf courses, and so on and so forth. RIBs, when we just charge the RIBs, that helps recharge the aquifer. They figure it takes about a year to get down to the Florida aquifer, doing some calculations. And all the water that we receive, that reclaim for public access has to meet primary and secondary drinking water standards. So it's really clean water. It does have some nitrogen and some phosphorus in it, phosphate. I always get those two mixed up. And here I've been there for 30 years. But that will dissipate in the ground. And these are some of the things. We've had a lot of agricultural irrigation. And if you can go to the next slide. What we're seeing is a huge shift in, like Jennifer mentioned, we got like 900 people moving to Florida a day. There's more and more developments. That picture on the right is an outline of the Horizons, part of the Horizons West development that's come out to West Orange County. When I got out there, I could go on second shift and not see a person on the road, maybe one car. Now we've got a major highway. There's all kinds of developments going on out there. Citrus agricultural, or the citrus irrigation, we had over 4,000 acres in the beginning. Now we're down to 1,500 acres. When they can get 156,000 or so an acre, and all the hassles that they're having with canker, psyllids, and greening, it's just not worth it for some of them to stay in business anymore, and they're just selling their land. And a big thing we're seeing is that with citrus, we could kind of work with them on irrigation. Residents, they run all the time, and I don't care if it rains. You'd think that irrigation will go down during the rain, but it hasn't. People just don't shut the irrigation systems off, like Jennifer said. A lot of the rain sensors, I guess, don't work. I know that people are being required to put these in, but there's a lot of problems with that. We just don't see the drop going down. So with less water to go into the ribs, we're having less aquifer recharge. And also in periods where there's been really high demand, we have a number of supplemental wells throughout the project that draw water from the aquifer to supplement the water when there's not enough water, reclaimed water, to supply the demand. And we've had to run these before, and that's almost defeating the purpose. We're not having to run them as much just because, there is reclaimed water, but, the demand increases the more more residential there is. And you can go to the next slide, please. You can see in 1990 that those 4 round dots in the upper left-hand side, that's us, that's Conserv. And most of that land around us was citrus. And on the right, you can see where land's been cleared, where houses are in. That land that is below us, those dotted cells going across the bottom of the clear line below us, those are rapid infiltration basins, and the same thing as the horseshoes above. But all that land below is now being developed and cleared. So there's less area for rainwater to recharge. It all gets directed to stormwater ponds or runoff, and there it's got fertilizers in it. It's got road wash off and all that going in it. Next slide. And Jennifer mentioned the changes in use, and I apologize for the graphics on the left-hand one. I found it in an old presentation, but that's 2003, and you can see that the agricultural has gone from 16 down to 8%, and these are from FDEP's website. These are their based on the annual reuse reports that we're required to submit annually. And you can see our public access has gone from 45 on up. I can't see it. My screen's kind of blocked, but that's gone up. You can see a lot of the other groundwater recharge has gone down. So residential is using more and more water. Next slide. And some of the things that we're seeing that's going to affect the future use is all these pollutants and contaminants emerging concerns: pharmaceuticals, steroids, personal care products, cleaning products, non-stick cookware, flame retardant, although they have changed the flame retardant, I believe, but you've got your fertilizer and nutrients. So with more people, you're seeing increased use, and what you flush down that toilet is going to wind up in the water you drink, no matter what. And another problem that we're facing, a lot of the springs in the area are looking at higher nitrates, and that was part of the Central Florida Water Initiative that Jennifer mentioned, is they're looking at wastewater, water reclamation facilities and areas that are affecting, like the Wekiva Springs. They did a huge Wekiva Springs study, and we were included in that study. We had to stop discharging to some of our rapid infiltration basins that were in that area, and they wanted to see if we were having a negative impact, and we found out we weren't, which was very nice to know. But septic tanks are probably the #1 problem that's affecting these springs, because they have a lot of high nitrates in them, and these cause algae blooms and problems along that line. So flushing pharmaceuticals, your leftovers down the toilet, that even putting them in the trash, don't do that. It really does affect things. And then on the next slide, I mentioned some of these, the Florida Springs Protection Act, the Wekiva Spring and Rock Springs Basin Manager Plan. They're looking at max daily loads for nitrogen. Some of the wastewater plants, water reclamation facilities, are going to have to go to advanced treatment, which is extremely expensive, but it will lower the nitrates and phosphorus down. And I know in some places, well, I know the Water Management District, and Jennifer knows this, they mandate using a lower quality water over potable water when it's available. So a lot of subdivisions are now having to put in dual water lines. They're putting in reclaim as well as potable water lines. And if reclaim water is available, they have to use that over potable for irrigation and things. And the other thing, do we need to look at water restrictions for reclaimed water in the future? Right now, in most places, it's not restricted. You can use it whenever. So, that may be a future, because we are looking at direct and indirect potable reuse. And if you can go to the next slide, please. You've kind of been using indirect potable reuse in a sense for a while, because if you reclaim water facility discharge into a surface water above a water plant, and then that water mixes with the surface water, and then the water plant is below that, then that's kind of indirect potable reuse in a sense. There are some places that have been doing that. They'll discharge to a reservoir at one end, and it will mix in the reservoir, and then they'll pull potable water out in the other end, and of course it's treated and everything. Florida statute, they passed a law. They're looking at how they can advance potable water reuse. In other words, it's going to go straight from the reuse facility into the potable water plant, where it'll be further treated and then go out into the potable water system. And I think that's going to be a serious thing that they're looking at in Florida. There's a lot of plants also that, and I'm sidetracking a tad bit, a lot of places use deep well injection to provide a barrier between salinity in the water, and a potable water supply that provides that barrier to keep the salt from coming out, because Florida is facing a lot of saltwater intrusion from overdrawing on some of the aquifers. There's some very limited aquifers in some areas, and especially the coastal cities are seeing a lot of saltwater intrusion, and places are looking at that as well. Next slide. And it's just kind of a short thing to remind people, what you flush winds up in the department. It doesn't just disappear, winds up in the environment. It just doesn't disappear. Take your pharmaceuticals to a disposal site. I know they're around. I've heard them advertised. If you're fertilizing, use organics if you can, and stay away from the edge of the water, and don't overwater, because it'll wash that fertilizer right back into the water body, a lake, canal, a river, and there goes your algae blooms and a lot of other problems. And then more awareness of what you're doing in personal care and cleaning products. Using natural organic products is a big help, and things along that line. And I don't know if I have anything after that or not. Nope, that's it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say that, as we move into this time of population growth, it's so important to think of innovative ways like reclaiming water and reallocating water, so that we can, be resilient as a city. So thank you for that. And now I want to introduce Dr. Brittany Sellers, a Sustainability Project Manager at Orlando Greenworks. Thank you so much for being here. I'll go ahead and give it over to you.
Great, thanks so much for having me. And an exciting development, since I originally had discussed and planned to be on this Hive, is I've recently been promoted to become our first ever Assistant Director of Sustainability for our office. So very exciting, and still in the process of transitioning over, but I get to interact even more closely across our different focus areas like water, which is just an incredible opportunity, and I'm so glad to be able to be of service. So most of you are probably familiar with Greenworks Orlando. We're the City of Orlando's Office of Sustainability and Resilience. Greenworks is what we go by as more of a campaign or colloquial name. We've been around since 2007. Mayor Dyer established our office as essentially to be on the front lines to help Orlando become one of the most environmentally sustainable, socially inclusive, and economically vibrant cities in the nation. So looking at all of those co-benefits, and just with these little slices here, really across a number of areas of sustainability. So we intersect and work on livability, local food, solid waste, transportation, clean energy, green buildings. But for today, we're gonna hop right into the waterfront side of things. Go to the next slide. I'm really interested in sharing not only what we're doing with to inundate everybody with a number of different initiatives we have, but also to talk about the process. And following on the heels of the great work that's already been discussed, and even on the City of Orlando side, I thought it may be interesting to go ahead and just share how Greenworks helps to focus our action and use data-driven decision-making to drive our initiatives, the direction we're going, and accelerate our progress. You can go to the next slide. So starting off with identification, there is a heavy data lift that we do at least annually, but certainly with the inception of our office, to look at some of the trends. So similar to what Jennifer was showing at the beginning of the presentation regarding what is the state of not only potable water use, but also reclaimed water or wastewater, and how can we contribute to help prevent some of those pollutants from entering our water stream? And the same goes for our streets and stormwater division. Comparably speaking, Greenworks is the new kid on the block. Even though we've been around for 13 years, we know that this great work has been going on for decades across the city. And so in a lot of opportunities, we're able to serve as sort of a liaison between the sustainability concerns and the great work the department's already doing. In other cases, we're able to set our own unique, ambitious goals and collaborate across departments as well as with the community to determine what needs to be done to be able to preserve water as a resource. Next slide, please. One of the other approaches that we take, in addition to the trends that we're seeing in the data and the directions that we need to go, how quickly we need to get there, is also thinking concurrently about some of those themes that I mentioned in Mayor Dyer's goals. So kind of looking at the left, we have a number of job opportunities and green jobs that can be created in any of the work that we're doing. So whenever we're able to approach a problem and provide a solution, that's something we're looking towards. Of course, saving money is top of mind for everyone, but particularly for some of our more vulnerable and at-risk homes, which may have older plumbing or not the most efficient devices. That's something else that comes to mind. Certainly public health in protecting our drinking water supply and potable water resources. And then looking across to climate vulnerabilities and opportunities to address climate resilience, particularly regarding some of the social inequities and how they intersect with climate change. Next slide, please. One of the examples that I'd like to share that helps to provide an intersectional type of approach towards these solutions that we're trying to promote across the city, but actually provide direct opportunities for involvement, is the unlocking of two different financing programs. One is called Property Assessed Clean Energy, where essentially individuals who own a home can take out an assessment on their property and make an improvement where they can save energy, water, or make their home more resilient, and pay it annually through their property taxes out to 25 years. So it's a great opportunity to save up front, even if you don't have the cash on hand, or this isn't something that maybe you want to charge to a credit card or another high interest loan. That's one opportunity to do that with any of the improvements shown here and many more. Another is SELF, whose logo I have pictured here, which is the Solar and Energy Loan Fund. This also covers very similar types of improvements for the home. And what's really unique about SELF is that they're focused on the individuals and their stories. So maybe they have a lower credit score, they're not bringing in very high income every month. They talk with the individuals, get an understanding of how they're in their situation, what they're trying to do, and what their needs are. So someone might be a medical patient who's been trying to keep up with costly medical expenses, and their credit score unfortunately has taken a dip because of that. SELF will work with them and provide low interest loans for 5 to 7 years to make these types of improvements. So it could be a roof repair, it could be getting more high efficiency windows, and it certainly could be upgrading their plumbing system and different devices throughout their home to be more water efficient as well. Next slide. All right, so moving on from identifying what some of our concerns are and the solutions that might be a good fit for them is moving towards commitments. Some of the goals that we have across our Greenworks office, which of course permeate throughout the entire community, are first to reduce our water consumption by 20%. That is on a per capita basis, so we're taking growth into account for that as well. Continuing to monitor our lakes and ensure that as many as possible meet good quality water standards. Continuing to promote sustainable landscaping practices, especially as we're a city to a number of lakes. We need to walk the talk in our own management of those lands and share with others what they can do to be involved. Expanding education and outreach to manage water as a resource to as many individuals as in our community as we can. And then looking ahead to climate resilience, mitigating inland flooding during extreme weather events, certainly something that we take to heart here in Orlando, even if it doesn't get the same level of attention as coastal surge and flooding that we see with some of our peers around the perimeter of the state. So moving from the commitment that we made, some of the goals that I just mentioned in our Community Sustainability Action Plan, we have a number of strategies. We have ambitious goals. How do we get there? Well, we start with prioritizing those that are going to have the highest impact and are the most feasible or provide some level of synergy with other work that we're doing. Next slide. Here's an example of one way that we can consider the various strategies that we could implement really across any of our focus areas. But some of them are policy, since we work in local government. Regulation is certainly top of mind when it comes to collaborating with a lot of our community partners or what individuals might think of when they think of local government. But that's only one tool in our toolbox. Providing financing mechanisms like the Solar and Energy Loan Fund that I just mentioned is one opportunity to help provide a solution that fits the problem at hand. If individuals aren't able to put money up front to save on something like maybe there's a water leak or an inefficient device in their home, and the cost isn't adding up so much at any given time that it seems worth it, and having to make other sacrifices, they're not going to be able to address that concern. Sometimes it's informational, and having a campaign just to share information about what we could be doing better is all that it takes, just to at least get the ball rolling and let individuals know. Next is programmatic. So any of the programs that we offer might not be required, but something where individuals or businesses and organizations can be a part of is certainly another important element. And then the last piece being technology. So something like some of the more interesting and innovative smart meters that may even be solar powered and integrate rain gauges as well can be useful information. Certainly working towards automation of devices can help to sidestep the problem of human error or lack of use. But those are important as one piece in this overall approach that we're taking. And across the bottom, I have some examples of exactly what these programs are. So financing, like OUC's rebate on upgrading to a more efficient toilet, or bag it, don't blow it. So essentially encouraging individuals to bag up or ideally compost their leaves versus blowing them into the street, which will ultimately end up in the storm drain, add excess nutrients, lead to algae blooms and things of that nature. New green building incentive program that we actually just passed within the last 2 months, which is very exciting. So providing a tax rebate to developers to build green, really, especially for businesses that may be on the fence between whether or not they want to approach LEED, that this can help to push them over that barrier. Certainly from the regulatory standpoint, we're all familiar with quote enforcement. So here's just one such example. And then technology, particularly as we're looking to become a future ready city. Some of the other prioritizing factors that we want to take into account when thinking of not only the different types of strategies, but is the level of feasibility. So how likely would it be that we could move forward with one of our ambitious strategies at a given time, given any number of factors, other programs that we have going on, maybe any contentious nature of a particular policy or program, how it's going to affect the community, what it might cost in the long and short run, just as some examples, versus the impact that it's going to make. So there are, of course, high feasibility and high impact projects, which are great. Some present more of a challenge, and some are relatively easy, such as pulling together, an informational campaign on something that we already have and maybe revamping it for a holiday like we did in the last example. Next slide, please. One example of a policy that we've been discussing for the last several years, because it was a particularly difficult policy to pass, is our energy benchmarking, transparency, and audits policy for our largest building in Orlando. So thinking of a data-driven strategy, we looked at those that take up the most square footage across the city of Orlando, those which use the most energy, as well as water resources, and providing an opportunity for those individuals to benchmark their buildings, see how they perform against comparable building types, and then make that information publicly available. So on the left, we have a pretty general example to try to kind of gain a sense of familiarity with the energy guides that exist on devices currently. And to the right, that is an actual map of the buildings that need to benchmark with our policy. That red area is the city of Orlando's jurisdiction kind of superimposed. So you can see in accordance with our horseshoe shape, the buildings that need to comply. And the size of those circles is based on the water and energy resources that they're currently using. So at this time, or prior to the policy rather, if you're going to move into a new space, either as a tenant of a high-rise building downtown or looking to move into a multifamily complex, utilities are your second highest costs, and you would have no insight into what that might be in a space. You probably just know what your rent might be. And in this case, we're providing that information, holding businesses accountable, and driving improvements in the process, even though there's no requirement. Knowledge is power, and this information tends to lead to improvements over time. Moving over to leadership and leading by example across the city of Orlando, which is something, of course, we always want to do in our own operations before suggesting something to the community. You can go to the next slide. Just a quick list of examples of the type of properties that we manage across city facilities. So we have our large venues like the Amway Center. I did include Orlando City Soccer Stadium, although that could be, I guess, changed out with the Camping World Stadium. They are a close partner of ours and are actually one of the facilities that needs to comply with that policy that I mentioned. So I wanted to include that as well. We also have our Colonial Town community center there, which has not only a pool, but a community garden, some recreational areas, as well as the building itself. And then our Dr. Phillips Center, all very different types of buildings with different uses going and operating at different hours by sometimes different sets of individuals with different needs, what they're doing in those spaces. So paying close attention not only to the water use at those spaces, but going through and making energy and water retrofits. So finding those opportunities to make improvements, even in an older building or an interesting mixed use building, to become as efficient as it possibly can. And for all new construction to be at least LEED Silver or above, which we've done consistently for the last 7 years or so. And then moving, of course, towards where the rubber really meets the road, looking at community-wide action as the next step of implementing these, whatever it may be, policy or program. Next slide. And some examples of that in really working directly with our community is providing programming like free fertilizer workshops, understanding how they can meet local code, what they need to do, really reiterating the fact that we have all these beautiful lakes we want to protect and that our lakes start right at everyone's lawn and the behaviors that they're engaging in right there. As well as providing free rain barrels and providing rain barrel workshops, which we've been able to continue to do remotely with contactless pickup this year, which has been great. We actually utilize repurposed soda syrup canisters from the Coca-Cola factory and provide installation kits for those, as well as painting learning opportunities and other engagement exercises. Next, please. And at Conserv 2, where Steve is based, there's an incredible education center that has been, I know, a long time in the works. And there's a public outreach coordinator who actually leads all these efforts, Alyssa Madrid, who does incredible work. There in the middle, I actually have a Girl Scout patch that was developed specifically for water conservation. But they do a number of K through 12 programming events in any given month. They have thousands of visitors that come through the year and really across all ages as well. So there's some formal programs in alignment with the local school competencies and other requirements for Orange County Public Schools, but there are also programs that are meant for adults and very small children, and really across the board. If there's an age group or a group of individuals who are interested in learning more about water use across the board, they have some programming for it. And then wrapping things up here, paying attention to monitoring, tracking, and seeing how we progress. So in closing, I wanted to wrap up with exactly how I started, talking about data and ultimately looking at the trends of how effective all of these programs and policies are and using that to determine how we need to iterate, evolve, and potentially expand or accelerate in the future. So the City Energy Project encompassed that building policy that I was mentioning earlier regarding benchmarking. We projected through a third-party research impact group study that was conducted that this policy has massive implications for water conservation, which you can see across the bottom. Some of this is direct water efficiency practices that we can expect to see in these spaces, and some of this comes from that energy-water nexus, from less energy required to be generated from our plant. And so, of course, like anything, we're already tracking the progress and the impact of this policy. And as we get closer in this upcoming decade, is something we're going to continue to do and look at opportunities to expand or evolve this policy, as well as all of the other strategies we have going on, and looking to the numbers to guide us. Thank you so much. That's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brittany. It's comforting to know that the City of Orlando does take water conservation so seriously, and they're working closely with you at Greenworks to make that happen in a very integrative way. So now we're going to go ahead and get into some questions. My first question for you, first to the audience, if you do have questions for all of our panelists or a specific panelist, just go ahead and throw it in the comments, and we'll pull those out and read them off as well. My first question is, what are some of the greatest threats to our water supply in Central Florida? And I'll start with Jennifer.
I think everyone has highlighted what one of the greatest threats is, and that's that population growth and an increasing need for water is only going to be able to be sustainable when we are looking at educating people in how they're using water, how they can conserve water, and making it possible to do that conservation. So in other words, being able to help with the cost of new irrigation systems or smart controllers, those type of things that do increase the amount of water that can be saved in the landscape. Potentially looking at different ways to develop in terms of developing with water conservation as a framework. So there is a Water Star certification program that takes into account outdoor and indoor fixtures, landscaping, so that the building and the landscaping itself is built to a greater efficiency. So looking at those type of things will help as we continue to grow.
Absolutely. Steve, do you have anything to add?
She summed it up pretty good, but I would like to add about the pollutants and contaminants of emerging concern, because these do not go away quickly. They don't dissipate quickly. They can accumulate, and they are becoming more of a concern. I believe the government, EPA, is looking at more regulations regarding these things. And it's just very costly to treat and get out of the water as well. So that's a big concern, I believe. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Brittany?
Of course, both excellent answers. So the only thing I would add in addition to those responses is climate change itself. With the increased storms that we are already seeing and increased precipitation events, especially with the warm temperatures in Florida, already warmer surface waters, we can expect to see more airborne, vector-borne, and waterborne illnesses. Certainly, as has been discussed with the holistic nature of our various water systems, it's almost inevitable that there'll be some level of infiltration. And so being mindful of what's going into one system affecting another, and the stress on our systems whenever those events occur, both from the direct precipitation itself, educational opportunities for individuals to prepare in advance, but also throughout the storm and shortly thereafter, not flushing their toilets extra, not taking long showers after the storm, as well as the increased population growth that sometimes we experience more in individual pops after those events because of climate migration. So really all of this tying together and having an increased level of urgency.
Yes, all great answers. Thank you, guys. Another question to kind of follow that up. What are the worst effects of not only the polluting, but also draining all of our water? For example, correct me if I'm wrong, but I recently learned that pulling out groundwater and overusing it even leads to sinkholes sometimes. So lots of things can happen, but what are some of the worst effects, in your opinion, that happens from this water crisis? And I'll go ahead and start with you, Jennifer, again.
I think the worst effects that we see are those of the compounding or the nexus of water quality and water quantity and where those collide, because anytime that we are thinking about our surface waters and our springs and our groundwater even, it is important to understand that what we may put on our landscapes will ultimately make its way into those water bodies, and that, like most of our issues, that when we even talk about conserving water or the positive things we can do, we often talk about how every drop counts. It's the same when we're thinking about those negative things like nutrients in our landscapes. There's that added compounding issue of nutrients on our lawns, septic systems, those type of things. And so it's that connection between how we utilize water, how we may overuse water, and in those times of drought, there can be those compounding issues. So that's what I would say, that connection between our water quantity and water quality.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a vicious cycle. Steve, do you have anything to add? What do you think is the worst effects of this water crisis?
Well, you're going to wind up with overdrawing the aquifer. You're going to wind up with a lot more saltwater intrusion, and we have to guard against that. Like I said earlier, you can kind of use salinity barriers by putting reclaim as a barrier, but that's only going to increase with the overdraw the aquifer if we don't take further precautions against that, and that's going to limit your water supply. And that's it.
All right. Thank you. Brittany?
I think in this case, those are both downstream effects that we can expect to see. So I think a current consequence that's leading to some of those effects that we're seeing is a lack of urgency regarding these matters. And I would say, as a consequence on a consequence, getting to a different way to communicate the value of these resources, the cost, both in terms of dollars, but of course, infrastructure and public health, emergency events, things of that nature, for not building green, for example, or for not providing low impact development or more resilient infrastructure for protecting these resources to begin with, as well as protecting the pollution from entering our water streams as well, is something that's really important, and certainly something that we're grappling with at this time to try to communicate this in a way that seems as urgent and as tangible as energy conservation, which currently, just due to our rate structures, has more of an impact in terms of dollars and cents, and a change that you can see on your utility bill, as well as that immediate return with water and the way that it's priced. That's not something that we see as immediately, and so we're working towards having this more existential conversation about literally running out of water, which is something that I don't think we're used to discussing at this elevated and really urgent state.
Awesome answer. Sorry about that. I think I froze for a second, so I might have cut out. But going off of that answer, so what steps need to be taken to ensure plentiful and safe water and water quality and quantity for the future generations? And again, I'll go ahead and start with Jennifer.
A lot of it has to do with education and people as they are living here or maybe moving here and are new to the area. So often I hear people say, why on earth would I need to worry about water conservation? You tell me about how much it rains here and about how many lakes and how much wetlands we have in the state. Why would conservation be important? And so I would say helping people to understand that all of those waters are connected, that it is important that we maintain those lakes, and that all of our waters are connected, and that is ultimately why we need to conserve water. And we do have an ever increasing population that are utilizing those waters.
Awesome. Yeah, education is so important, and inspiring people to do something about it, because water conservation is one of the greatest examples that I like to use to get people to take action in plastic pollution and climate action in general, because there's a clear measurement that individual households are what is using the most of water. And like you guys showed in your graphs, people usually think it's industrial or agricultural use, but it really is the households. So Steve, do you want to add to that?
God, I lost my train of thought.
I
Yeah,
can repeat the question if you want.
no, that's okay. I think I agree with Jennifer. People need to be educated. They need to understand the water cycle, and where the water comes from and where it goes. And they need to understand how it gets down into the aquifer. Back in the olden days, a sinkhole was a go away hole. You dumped it down the sinkhole to get rid of it. And there was a video that was done, and I cannot remember his name. I want to say it was that the video was the Underground Rivers of Florida, but it was a diver, and they went as a team through the Florida aquifer while another team followed them above, and they went through, and in some places they had to take off their tanks to squeeze through. But it was very interesting that you could tell when they came near a sinkhole that the water got very nasty, and they would find barrels and all kinds of garbage around the sinkhole. And so people need to understand, what they're doing and where things are going. Um, that's really critical, I think. And I think we need to come up with new ways to treat stormwater. Um, People don't understand that when you, like I think Brittany mentioned, blow the leaves in the street or the grass in the street, that stuff, the fertilizer that's in there and that organic matter washes into those storm drains. And yes, some of them have built-in filters to take some of that out, but a lot of that winds up in the lakes, in the streams, where it causes nitrogen, algae blooms. And people got to understand that. I see it all the time in my neighborhood, and I'm like, don't do that. It's not good. People don't understand that. So education is a big process, I think. Thank you.
Absolutely. So important. Thank you, Steve. Brittany?
Yeah, definitely. Just building on those answers, providing opportunities for engagement and education, having conversations with friends. It's something that's kind of funny, and I know we consider it taboo, but even talking about personal care products and feminine products, I have a picture on my phone of what it looks to have a lift station backed up with a lot of those products just essentially wrapped around and blocking the operation from working. And not only is that a nasty job to do, but no one wants to see sewage overflowing in their own street. And so that exact concept that Steve is mentioning about there's no way it's going somewhere can be pretty close actually to where one is. So talking about that a little bit more, having sometimes uncomfortable conversations, trying to normalize that a little bit can really go a long way. But beyond my personal perspective, wearing more of my city hat, we provide a number of great training resources and opportunities that anyone can take part of, individuals and organizations. We have city training sessions, as I shared earlier, on correct fertilization and having a lake-friendly lawn, something that you can boast about, put a sign in your yard. You can attend staff or neighborhood meetings that we have on a regular basis and meet up with other concerned residents. Particularly if there's a lake near your community that you'd like to really essentially adopt and take ownership over and try to preserve and make that connection that anything going down that storm drain is ultimately going to empty into that body of water. We have a newsletter that you can sign up for, and we have educational resources that are meant to share. So sometimes they're just pamphlets or rat cards. We have great interactive programs like our grease jugs to prevent sewage backups from pouring used cooking grease into or down the drain. We have a plastic container that can be changed out at any of our fire stations or community centers. It's free. It's just literally a swap on one side of the rack to another. What's a great program and has gained a lot of traction just from our office sharing that information and water reclamation hosting this incredible opportunity to do that. That oil gets turned into biofuel, which is really cool also. And then we have regular opportunities to volunteer. So that could be marking stormwater drains. We have that great art project where in different communities and neighborhoods across the city, you might see some interesting murals there that have been painted. There's a Lake Watch citizen science program you can take part of, and cleanup events that go on a regular basis with Keep Orlando Beautiful. So any number of opportunities to help amplify and kind of be a force multiplier for the message. So it's not just between you and your neighbor and the next person, but to be able to empower everyone to share that information beyond and have the biggest possible effect.
Awesome. Yes, thank you all for those great answers. Education is obviously so important, and of course, so is action. And going off of your answers, so what can be done to educate and communicate this information to Floridians and get them to understand the urgency of the water crisis? Because it's so easy to just forget about it when your tap turns on and magic water comes out from nobody knows where. And so how can we educate people about understanding our water and the water crisis? Jennifer, we'll start with you.
I think that opportunities such as this is a great way to really start with education. I think that our local governments are doing a great job having programming that is available for their residents. The IFAS extension offices have great programs and are a tremendous resource in all of the programming that they're able to have. The Water Management District, I go out and I give presentations trying to educate groups, those type of things. And I would frequently get well, what are you doing in HOAs? And so we started providing educational opportunities for those community association managers, trying to help them be informed about ways that they can conserve water in those common areas, tips, those kind of things, also for stormwater. And we'll be rolling out a course on conservation easements. And so the community association managers can get certification or continuing education for taking those courses, and hopefully then they gain information that they can take to their boards and further projects.
Awesome. Thank you. Steve?
I think also making people aware, schools, colleges, whomever you can think of along that line, and opening up your facility for a tour if you're able to. It helps people to get a better understanding of the process. We've done a great deal of tours, and it kind of shows, although we only receive the reclaimed water, it shows where it goes, what happens with it, and all that. And I think that's one thing, tours at reclaimed water facilities and all that, water plants even, is a good thing.
Awesome. Thank you. Brittany?
I think beyond some of the individual opportunities that I was just mentioning, there's also organization-wide opportunities. So if you work in an office space, there are groups that can come out, or even the city who can come out and talk with your organization about what they're doing, how they can make improvements, share the information. Lunch and learn style can be really casual. One example of this type of programming is a partnership we have with the Audubon Center for Birds of Prey, and they have a Water for Florida's Future program that's been co-sponsored by Duke and is absolutely wonderful, really gets at the heart of potable water consumption, the state of our aquifer. And they mentioned 3 things that anyone can do to make a difference. 2 are easy and 1 is a little bit more of a stretch. But they provide aerators for your faucet at home. So in addition to turning off between washing or brushing, that's something really simple that you can do to minimize the flow of water, and really you don't even notice it. I love that because you can get them for, I think, under $1 at the hardware store, and they're renter friendly. You can put them in and take them out. The same as a dye kit test for your toilet to see if it's leaking. That can be one of the largest sources of lost water and wasted water, is just having a leaky toilet. And this little dye kit you put in the back, you can see if you see that color in the bowl of the toilet. It's something, it feels like a little kid science experiment. It takes about 3 minutes and is interesting to see. Again, this is renter friendly. You could have your maintenance team come out. It's usually a really easy switch for what needs to be done there. And the more ambitious step is to go ahead and do a toilet replacement, particularly if you have a toilet that's more than 12 years old, before they started standardizing some more efficient models. And so if you're in a position to be able to do that, both Duke and OUC, I believe, offer rebates on those particular types of improvements. You can also just have somebody come out and do an energy or water audit, and they can point out some of these things to you directly. They usually provide a free kit for conservation at home too. So just to be empowered wherever you are, regardless of if you're renting in a multifamily or you own your home, there's still steps that you can do that are simple and easy, and you can share the good news with your neighbors or colleagues.
Awesome, thank you. Since we are talking about education and how important it is, and this is an opportunity, if you guys have any lesser known tips on how to either conserve water or not pollute water. Brittany, I know you just named them, sorry. You're good at segueing into my next question. But yeah, if you have any lesser known tips that you like to do, we'd love to hear it. So Jennifer, would you like to go first?
I would say, building off of Brittany's, you can use those dye tab kits, or if you don't have those, you can also just use food coloring, and you are able to drop food coloring in the back of your toilet, so in the tank, wait about 5 minutes, and if there's any color in the bowl, then you have a leak, and usually that's a leaky flapper. And so the best thing to do is just test that out. Like Brittany said, you can lose about 90 gallons a day just with a leaky toilet. Another thing that a lot of our utilities in our district do have those water audits that they're able to do. They will come out and both look at your outdoor irrigation, if you have it, help you understand how much water you're using in your irrigation, what your yard might need, and help you understand how you could conserve water through your irrigation. And they also will help you determine if you have a leak inside your house. I would say that's one of the fairly easy things to do, is you can turn off all of your water. You're able to find your water meter, make an observation of it, and then wait about 10 minutes and go look at it again and make sure that nothing is moved if no one is using any water. Because again, leaks can utilize about 15% of water that's used in a home.
Wow.
And so that's water that's just getting wasted.
That's crazy. That's a
So,
challenge for all of you watching. Please go
right.
do that.
And,
right.
and I would also just remind people that simple things like knowing how much water your shower head uses. A typical shower head is going to use about 2.5 gallons a minute. And so most people don't think about their 10-minute shower in the morning using 25 gallons of water. So you could do two things. You could either take a shorter shower, or you could replace your head with a more water efficient shower head, or I guess you could do both of them and save even more water. But I would say that's one of the biggest surprises, is how much water a shower uses.
Absolutely. Thank you. Steve?
On a funny note, in a sense, I was in the Navy for 8 years, and when you took a shower, you turned the water on, got wet, turned it off, soaped up, turned it back on to rinse off, and that was your shower. I don't think people go by that now, but that is one way to save water. But there's another way. You've always got to run your water when you're trying to get hot water. You've always got to run your water for a while for it to get hot. Keep a gallon jug around. Fill the jug with water, and you while you're waiting for it to get hot, instead of going down the drain, fill the jug and then water your plants with it, or let the chlorine dissipate and use it to water your animals.
Awesome.
So.
Brittany?
I think really just leveraging an opportunity where anytime anything can be easier is always great. I had some friends who had a really hard time keeping up with their lawn and would always get frustrated. Their grass would always die. We talked about Florida friendly and xeriscaping practices for a long time, and they thought it seemed really ambitious. Ultimately, they went with a very rock and pebble heavy front lawn with like minimal upkeep, except for a garden where they grow their vegetables, which is the one type of landscaping they really enjoy. And realizing how much less work, less guilt, less wasted money it was ultimately the biggest selling point with all of that. So understanding, of course, the environmental impacts, but the fact that it makes it easier for them. And I think that that's something that everybody can get on board with and takes a little bit less convincing.
Absolutely. Thank you. And on that note, Ideas for Us has fleet farming program, which is growing foods, not lawns. So growing food in your front lawn saves money and water. It's locally fresh grown produce. So that's another idea. So to close out, if you guys want to just talk about maybe touch on a little more or add a little bit about how your organization does do this work to mitigate the climate crisis and how people can get involved as a closing. So Jennifer, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay. I think, as I mentioned, the water supply plans are one of the biggest ways that the district is working to ensure that sustainable availability of water for us now and into the future, really looking at the planning opportunities at those alternative ways to utilize water to help local governments with their utilities to be able to fund those projects, so that there isn't oh my goodness, we are in a severe water crisis, we need to figure out something to do tomorrow, but rather that thinking about it, planning it, those type of things. I will also mention in my direct role, we have a grant program for middle and high school, public school and charter school teachers to do up to a $2,000 water related project. I know our district has it, as well as Southwest Florida Water Management District. And these are great opportunities to do additional projects that you might not be able to do without that additional funding, field trips, because getting out and getting to observe some of our natural resources as they are now, hopefully endearing people to those areas and wanting to help them understand how they can protect them are some of the ways that we're really working to help with our water resources.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, Steve.
I would say on our end, a lot of it is educating through tours that we do from community colleges, some of the local schools, and it's also working with some of the people that we're able to. Residents, there's not a lot we can do there um, um, on that end because they're not technically our customers in that sense. But we work with a lot of the landscape nurseries, um, the golf courses on working with them in irrigation when there's times in high demand and things along that line. But I think the biggest thing that we do is trying to educate people through tours and all on water usage and how it's being used.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Brittany?
Lastly, I would say coming out and showing support during our city council meetings or any other meetings with elected officials, their constituents, and hearing from you directly helps to provide guidance as to what's important and where we need to spend our time and our taxpayer dollars and our effort and staff time focusing. So with Greenworks, if you signed up for our newsletter, if you're following some of the work that we do, there's often an opportunity in advance to come out and show support. But even if something's already passed and you think like our green building incentive program that we're providing a tax rebate for developers to build green is a good idea, that's a great opportunity to email any of our council members or our mayor and say, I really like that you did this. Thank you. I'd like to see more of it. It's really reaffirming. It's important to make your voice heard and just stay up to date on some of those topics. And there's easy ways to stay informed to be able to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to thank you all for this incredible conversation on the water crisis and water conservation. I know I've learned so much, and it's really reassuring to know there's so many different programs and opportunities out there in our area that's trying to conserve water, and that even the audience can get involved. So thank you all. Now I'm going to talk about ways that you all can get involved with our work. And we do have a shoreline restoration coming up that I'll talk about in a second. But our most recent event that we have coming up is on January 20th. We're doing a community garden refresh at Quest with United Way. So if you want to get your hands dirty and do some gardening, please come out to that. You can sign up on our Facebook through our Eventbrite. And we have a waterway cleanup at Lake Monroe with Conserv. So this is a great way to, protect our water supply. I believe Lake Monroe does eventually flow off into the ocean. So ocean plastic pollution is something that's super important to me. And so, we're going to clean it up from the source. And it's a lot of fun. We're going to be social distancing, of course. You have to wear a mask above your nose. And we'll be collecting not only trash, but also recycling. Last time, I think we collected like 23 bags of trash and 13 bags of recycling. And it was a ton of fun. They have all the resources. You can use the clamping things and gloves. And it's a great time. So that'll be on January 23rd at 9:30 a.m. to 12. So you can sign up for that on our Facebook as well. And then our next Hive, we're going to be discussing food and the science behind lab-grown meat, which is the new science that I'm really excited to learn about. So please tune in for that on February 3rd with my friend Jeremy. And we also have interns, an internship program coming up in spring. It's starting in about a week and a half, but you can sign up now. It's not too late. We would love to have you join our team, no matter what your major or even your age is. We would love to have you help us with either a fleet farming program, ideas for us, marketing, whatever you're interested in. I'm sure we have a place for you. Also, we have a very exciting announcement. We've started a branch in Kenya with our amazing leaders led by two awesome young women. Arya Harania is the branch leader, and she is working with Wild Now, a conservation organization there. And they're focusing on elephant conservation and youth empowerment to plant trees and get people educated on climate change. So please like them, follow them on Facebook and Instagram, and stay updated to the awesome work that they're doing. So thank you all so much for coming today. We've got a lot of great stuff coming up, so please give us a follow and stay up to date on all of our programming, and stay safe out there, everyone. Thank you all so much.